Welcome to today's live. Hello, everyone. As you can see, my hand is scratched up. I have cats, I have kittens, and they play rough. So if you see my hands, it's like, what happened to her? It's my cats. So welcome everyone. It's another Friday Q&A. I'm Rosalia Rivera, founder of Consent Parenting, and here on Substack, I come live. I come on live every Friday. Sometimes the time changes, but this week I wanted to make sure that I was answering any questions that you have about grooming, as that is this month's topic. And every month I have a theme, even though I do post lots of different content. But I do, with the lives, go into the themes that are, you know, the themes of the month. So this month, I've been talking about all the different aspects of grooming. As many of you have already seen, I just dropped a new blog post yesterday sharing a story about my own experience with grooming, and particularly with a family member. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. I talk about how this individual groomed the entire community, including me. And as a child, I thought, you know, they're such a great person because everybody in the community thinks that they're such a great person. And what I realized in retrospect is that this is how offenders operate. And through evidence, not just my own experience, but other experts who have researched and studied the topic of grooming, which is something that sadly most parents aren't aware of. They don't know enough about. Most adults don't know enough about it. And this is how offenders have typically gotten away with offending and not either getting caught or having people just not accept the truth and not accept that this person could do something like that because they were groomed. They were um, made to trust that person so deeply that it was cognitive dissonance. They just couldn't believe that that person could do something so terrible. And so, a lot of times, this is where you get people who will believe the offender instead of believing the victim. And this is how a lot of cases in court end up where the crime is not, punished, the offender is not held accountable, and they are either given very lenient conviction or they are found not guilty when in fact they are. And so grooming is something that every adult really needs to learn about, understand how it happens, and learn what the signs are so that if they spot the signs, they can intervene. And within organizations like schools, daycares, youth serving organizations, churches, places of worship in general, it's so important that you have strong protective policies in place so that grooming cannot happen. And what I mean by that is, if a good policy is in place, and I talked about that last week in last week's live, so I'm not going to go too far into it today, but if there's a good policy in place, then grooming is very hard for an offender to implement. It's very hard for an offender to groom people effectively and get away with abuse because good, solid policies are in place. This week, however, I want to dive into some other aspects of grooming. But I also want to say, if you have questions, since this is a live Q&A, please feel free to post it in the comments. I see a few of you are here. So if you have a question, feel free to post that in the comments and I can answer that for you today. But in case there aren't any questions, I did want to share a few things from past consultations that I've done with parents who have reached out to me because they've had suspicions or they've seen, they've learned about grooming and then they saw the signs and they tried to intervene. And the people around them were so groomed that when the parent brought the suspicion up, everyone else around them was in denial. And when the parents spoke to me about it, it was very evident that these were definitely grooming strategies. And my recommendation was make sure that this individual is not alone with a child one on one, that they don't have access, that they are not given that access. But the people around them were pushing back on this. So I wanted to share a couple of those stories so that you can understand the power of grooming and why it's so important to not just be educated yourself, but to educate others, and especially those who are around your child, who are caregivers, who are working with children, to help them learn about grooming as well. Because when everyone as a community is informed about this, then it's much less likely that they will also be groomed, that an offender can groom the entire community. And it's something that I think most people um, just don't really recognize. They think a child can be groomed, right? Most of us have learned people are grooming children. And while that is absolutely true, it's part of the process, the parent is also groomed. And while that is true and also part of the process, they're also grooming the community at large. Because if they can get deniability from most people, then they will gaslight the parent, right? And if the parent is groomed unknowingly, then the offender can gaslight the parent in case they see something, and then the parent will feel guilty that they're even thinking such thoughts. How could you even think that? How could you even you know have that in your thoughts, that I would do something like that, or that that person would do something like that? So even when there is clear evidence of grooming, if people are not informed, they won't understand it. They won't understand the suspicion. They won't understand the concern that the parent has, and they will get away with things, right? Because when there's pushback from a large number of people, the parent will move back and say, okay, maybe I am, seeing things wrong. Maybe I am, overthinking this. Maybe I am being paranoid. And this is particularly impactful for those who are survivors. They may fear even coming forward with a suspicion because they already feel like they're being paranoid. And so it's a higher chance even that the child could be groomed and abused, because the adult, the survivor parent, the parent with lived experience, will think, maybe I'm seeing things, I'm reading into this. No one's going to believe me. They're going to think I'm paranoid, especially if, they know about my history or my past. So, another reason why it's so important to get educated, to educate others. And so I wanted to share two particular situations. So if you are not familiar with my work, besides teaching workshops and classes, I also do one-on-one consultations. And I have had parents who've reached out, and one in particular, there's two in particular that stood out that I wanted to share today. And of course, I'm going to keep as much of it as confidential, and change some of the details just to make sure that they feel like their details are being kept confidential. So this was a parent who has a sibling who has a fiance, and that individual was showing some signs that seemed concerning to these parents. And these parents both have one child who they went off to visit in a different country, and were visiting the sibling who is engaged, and met the fiance. And this person was very good with children, was seemed to just, seem like almost another kid in a way. And they would play video games or play board games, or just very kid friendly games, that this child just was like in heaven having this person play with them. And it just seemed to the parents initially like, oh, this is so great, like I can just hang out with my sibling now, and we can like have coffee in the kitchen, or like don't have to worry about it. They're playing with our child, and they're having a blast, and our kid seems to be having a blast with them. So, initially, it just seemed like they're such a great person, like, they're so good with kids, and this sibling was actually even saying, "We can't wait to have kids, like, as soon as, we get married, we're planning to start a family right away." My fiance just seems like they're just so excited to become a parent, and, you know, obviously, as you can see, they're just so good with kids. And, um, then there were other things that just kinda started happening during the visit where it was like, sort of this, like, lavishing of attention and, I think they stayed maybe for 1 or 2 weeks at their sibling's house, and so they were, staying there with them, but it was, like, on the 2nd or 3rd day, that individual brought them a treat or brought them, like, a gift or something, and it seemed kind of like more than what it should have been, like, it was, like, a bigger gift than, what you would give to a child that you just met. So it just seemed like that started to feel a little weird and was like, this person's, like, just really trying hard to, like, win my child's favor. My child already is, like, loving this person, really feeling comfortable, and just, something kinda started to feel a little off to this parent. So, um, a few days passed, and then they noticed that this, like, person was, like, tickling the child, and it was getting like, just slightly more physical than this parent was comfortable with, but again, there wasn't anything, like, overt, there wasn't anything that seemed, like, abnormal, but it was just this, like, growing feeling that this parent had. And then um, after, that was the extent of that kind of situation. And then after they left, the sibling reached out to the parent and expressed how much her fiance was, just gushing about the family and the child and like can't wait to see them and sent them like a gift in the mail because they wanted to just make sure that, they got this thing because they had like made this connection about sports and like everything just was so connected. Like, that there was this sort of push towards like, we have this wonderful connection, and the parent was kind of like, okay, sure, thanks for the gift, but wasn't really necessary. And this parent already was just, like, kind of feeling a little off about things. Um, and then they ended up going to visit a different family, and that fiancé and sibling were going to be coming to visit, and so they were going to be seeing them again in, like, a month or 2. And at this point, this parent was feeling a little apprehensive and was just kind of, like, not sure how they felt about this person, right? So the sibling calls ahead and says, my fiance is just so excited to see you guys, so excited to see XYZ child's name, right? And and so the parent is again kind of like, okay, now it's starting to be a little weird because this seems like they're just like going above and beyond and it's just a little bit more than the average person would be like interested in hanging out with a kid, So the parent kind of raises this concern and is like just a little strange like how interested they are and the sibling all of a sudden got a little defensive and was like, what are you talking about? Like totally normal, like my fiance is just like a big kid a lot of times. He just loves playing video games and, just kind of has this youthful, so there was just this like pushback right away, like, what are you talking about? And then during a dinner where, there was like the whole family, kids were playing in a different room, the fiance was, like, constantly gravitating to, like, hanging out with all the kids, like, just wanting to be with the group, the whole family, kids area, like, just always there. And the parents now were like, "This is weird. Why is this person hanging out more with the kids than with the adults? Like, don't you think that's kinda weird?" And then raises that point to the sibling, and the sibling's like, "Now you're being weird about it." Like, they just like hanging out with kids, like, not a big deal. And again, the parent feels like, "Okay, am I being weird about it?" And starts to kinda mention it to the other family members to see what they think. And everyone's like, I mean, they seem okay. And this is now someone who's been in the family. at family gatherings, has gotten to know the family like it's a fiance, right? So they've been around, they've gotten to know everybody. Everybody's just been groomed by this person to think they're just such a great person. They've noticed before that this person likes hanging out with kids, in the family, but they're just great with kids. And so everyone's just like, "What are you talking about?" to the parent, right? Now, the parent is kind of thinking, "Okay, maybe I am being a little bit, much." So, the kids are like everybody's now having dinner, they're, hanging out, and the adults are hanging out with the adults, the kids are hanging out with the kids, the fiance is, sitting at dinner with the adults, and they're just chatting, and somehow the topic comes up about the fact that, as soon as they get married, they're going to start a family, and they're so excited, and somehow makes an off comment remark, like just something really like a joke that should I guess to most people would be like, "Oh, obviously he didn't mean that," but it was something related to kids in relation to, um, sexuality. And it was I think everyone thought it was a little jarring, like, "That's not really funny." Like, I see where you're trying to make the joke, but, like, it's not really funny. But it was kind of taken by everybody as, like, it's kind of a weird joke, but, like, I'm sure he's just joking, like, it's just a bad joke, and everybody just kind of tried to play it off, and at this point, the parents, like, "That's it." Like, that is it. That's just weird. That's a weird joke to make. It does like, why would you joke about that? That's not funny, and everything else now just feels like what I've been feeling is right, and what everyone else is feeling is that they've just been tricked by this person, and I'm the only one who sees it. So the parent in this particular case reaches out to me and explains all this, and they're like, "Am I seeing things? Am I, like, imagining this? Like, what's going on?" And so I started asking some more questions about the history of this person. And, as we start digging in, they're like, well, actually, it's true that I've noticed this about my sibling's relationship with this person. And my sibling actually doesn't like because they've been in a previously negative and abusive relationship, they might not be seeing a lot of red flags. And like as we started digging into it, they realized that this person has actually really manipulated their sibling into a lot of things that they, never really felt comfortable about. And so it just was like, this doesn't feel right. Something about this doesn't feel right. And so as the sort of evidence kind of started mounting of all of the different ways in which this person groomed not only the siblings but the entire family and is very evidently, being strange and weird and telling inappropriate jokes and always seeking out hanging out with the kids and doing the gift giving and giving the special attention and trying to create the special bond, it started to kind of mount and they were like, "We don't feel comfortable with our child ever being alone with this person." And so they went ahead and spoke to the sibling about it and explained like, "We're just not comfortable. Here's the things that we're seeing. We're actually concerned about you having starting a family with this person." And it caused a lot of rifts, it caused a lot of, the, parent in the situation, I advise them to speak to the family at large as well, to, explain, "Here are the signs of grooming. This is, evidential information from experts. This is not something that we're, like, making up in our head. We're not trying to, like, push this person away because we don't like them. We're just seeing clear signs that something is up." And now we're not accusing this person of, doing inappropriate things, but we are saying we should not just blanketly trust this person with kids alone. And now somebody might say, well, that's accusing someone. No, it's not. It is actually just being cautious and making sure that you are putting protective factors in place and making sure that you are being proactive and putting, when I say protective factors in place, that would be the equivalent of an organization having policies in place to ensure that abuse cannot happen. Um, there were things that, you could do further to further push and prove, is this a safe person? And so some of those things that I'm going to recommend, and I only have enough time to share this one story today, so I will share the other story in a future video. But because I want to break down some of the things that you can do in a situation like this, right? And so some of the things that you can do are to invite yourself on to any situation. So, for example, if this person's like, hey, I would love to take, XYZ child to the park. I would love to take Timmy to get ice cream. I would love to take Cindy to, go get some fries and a milkshake. Down at the Dairy Queen, I can take them, and we'll be back in like 15 minutes. Any opportunity that they're looking to isolate the child is where you wanna step in and be like, "Oh, sure." And then at the very last minute, go, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna go. I really wanna get a shake too." And see how they respond. If they're like, "Oh, I can get you the shake, don't worry," that's a red flag because ultimately the person should be like, "Oh, sure. Like, let's go," right? You would think that a person who is not trying to get alone time with your child is gonna be happy and invite you or, be like, "Whatever, like, come along," versus, "Oh, I can get it for you, like, don't worry. Don't you have something else that you said you wanted to work on? Like, I can, I could we'll just be back in, like, 10 minutes," right? And somebody might be like, "Oh, 10 minutes, that's not a long time. Like, what could happen in 10 minutes?" A lot can happen in a car ride in 10 minutes. If it's somebody that you don't trust, if there's somebody that's, showing red flags, you don't want to create these opportunities, right? So you can test to see the reaction, the response. And I always say, be an interruptible or be an unpredictable parent, right? Unpredictable in that if it's somebody that you totally trust, show up early anyway, just because, you know, just check in. Um, Doors should always be open in spaces, even in the house where there is an adult and a child that is not you or, a safe adult that has proven themselves to be a safe adult, right? Something else that you can also do with these kinds of individuals is show your hand, which means talk to them about the fact that you're teaching body safety. Because if someone is targeting your child, what you need to do is make sure that they recognize, they fully, completely understand that you are not going to be a target, that you are educated about these kinds of things. And so you don't have to do it in a way that is like a standoff, you don't have to do it in a way that is accusatory. You can do it in a way that is like, you notice that they're tickling your child, and your child maybe doesn't feel comfortable yet saying something, or they don't feel comfortable using their voice yet because they're, maybe a toddler. They're just learning about how to use their voice and how to set boundaries. So it's your job as a parent to set the boundary and to call it out. Hey, I noticed that you're tickling. Or you don't even have to say, I notice. Hey, can you stop? It looks like Timmy is not enjoying that anymore. Um, Timmy sees that you've set the boundary, right? They're hearing your modeling of setting the boundary, and that adult now sees that you are willing to call out the behavior, right? They are testing not only the child, but the parent. Will the parent say anything? Will the parent, step in and set the boundary? And then you go, we're teaching our child body safety. And so we want them to know that when, they're not comfortable with something, that they get to say no. But since they're just learning right now, we're stepping in to do that for them. But, so we would appreciate if you can help be a safe adult by noticing body language. And if they don't look like they're comfortable, check in. Hey, do you want me to keep tickling? then they can, have the ability to shake their head or say no or say yes if they do want you to keep going. But this helps them learn about communication, and it helps them know that you are not someone that is going to just cross boundaries. Now you have opened up that conversation about how to, about the fact that you're teaching body safety. You've opened up that conversation that can lead to them maybe asking. Like, a safe adult would go, "Oh, I didn't like, what do you mean you're teaching body safety? Oh, what does that mean?" Right? And then you can dive into it further. "Oh, this means that we're teaching our child that they have a right to set a boundary, that they can say yes or no to hugs and kisses, that they can, if something feels uncomfortable, that they can say stop, etc." And so we're just, starting to read books to them, or we're, having these conversations. We don't force them to do that with anybody. We, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it lays that the groundwork for that conversation to start, to continue, to dive deeper if you need to, right? And then you can watch for that adult's response, right? You can say to yourself, "I noticed that this person like didn't want to respect it, or they kind of like dismissed it and made it seem like what I'm doing is ridiculous. They were trying to gaslight me about it, like, oh, I wasn't really tickling him, or oh, he seemed to enjoy it. I don't know what you're talking about." Like, whatever it was, right? You're getting information back as to whether this person is behaving like a safe adult or not. And that's going to continue to give you more information to determine, are these grooming signs that I'm seeing consistent with behavior that is crossing boundaries, with behavior that is more grooming behavior, right? Because a lot of times, one of the grooming behaviors that adults will do with children is to normalize that touching, sitting on the lap, tickling too hard, being really handsy with the child, seeing if the child will say anything, seeing if the parent will say anything, see, like normalizing as much as they can to see where anyone is setting the boundary, right? Um, Giving gifts that are more than the parent would think is appropriate, not asking the parent, if they can give the child candy or ice cream, or asking the child to keep a secret from the parent about something that seems really innocent. So there's all of these grooming behaviors. And again, if a parent isn't aware of them, they're not going to spot the grooming. If the parent is aware of them, but nobody else is, they may be like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he's just a nice person. He's just really friendly with kids. He's just really great with kids. He loves playing games with kids. He's a kid himself," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So what we want to do is start to have those conversations early. And so another example, quickly, that I'll give of this before we wrap up today is that this is why communicating ahead of time with the adults in your child's life about what grooming is and what those behaviors are that you want that safe adult to not do, so that it doesn't set your child up for facilitating grooming, and I'll explain what that means in a second. That's why these conversations are so important. So an example of this would be a grandparent, you are pretty sure is a safe person, okay? It's grandma maybe, or grandpa, and you're like, "It's my dad, my mom, like, I am pretty certain that they are not gonna do anything inappropriate." Great. However, they are maybe doing something that could set your child up to be groomed by someone else who is not safe. And here's what I mean by that. So, grandma or grandpa have your child over for supper, and you're going to pick them up later, and but they're having dinner at grandma or grandpa's house. So, grandma, being that she just wants to gain as much favor with your child as possible because she just loves them so much, and she wants to like be there for them and for them to love them back. And so grandma might be like, "Okay, you can have a cookie before supper, but don't tell your mom because she doesn't like, when you," and so it'll be our little secret. And it's an innocent thing, but this sets your child up to be able to keep secrets and to think that it's normal. It's an innocent little secret. Like, what's the big deal? I won't tell mom. I get to have a cookie. Grandma's safe. What's the big deal? So this is the kind of thing that you would want to say to grandma. "Hey, FYI, we're starting to teach body safety. One of the things that we're teaching is no secrets ever, because we are teaching our child that secrets are not safe. It's actually something that offenders use as a strategy to groom kids. Here's a little bit more information about it. Here's why we're asking you not to do it. Please do not ask our child to keep any kind of secrets. Even if you think it's an innocent secret, it's not. Like, secret keeping is not okay. We're teaching this as a rule. Please respect the rule. Do you understand why we're asking you this, right? Making sure that that person understands the why, because they're more likely to actually respect the rule if they understand the why. So not just saying don't do this, but here's why, right? Excuse me. So this is a sign that I've been talking too long and time's up anyway. So I'll leave it with that in terms of grooming and why it's so important to, number one, educate yourself, educate your children, but also educate the community of people around your kids. Because if they don't understand the whys, they won't understand how to spot the signs, how to intervene if they see something. If somebody sees something and they're like, hey, I noticed this too, you're now going to have an ally who's going to say, no, I noticed these things and they actually are not appropriate. And here's why this is not okay. And we need to make sure that that individual isn't alone with a child, right? So these are ways that we can create stronger, safer communities around all kids, not just our kids, but all kids. Because now when a community knows that person, I don't know if they're necessarily safe, they're not going to just let the neighbor's kid, the kid in, your kid's classroom, in the play group, also be alone with that person, right? So we are protecting more kids that way as well. So I hope that that was helpful. Um, Veronica said, "Oh no, the sexual jokes that are inappropriate." Yeah, this is something that I see adults do all the time. They're innuendo jokes, so they think, "Oh, the kid's not going to, understand." That's irrelevant. Like, that shouldn't happen when kids are around because we don't know what kids understand. Sometimes kids are really smart and they might even ask the question, "Well, what does that mean?" And then somebody's got to feel like awkward and weird. "Oh, don't worry about it." And then guess what? They're probably going to ask their older cousin, or they're probably gonna ask some other kid at school, "Hey, I heard all the adults laugh about this. Do you know what this means?" And then other kids are asking other kids, they're asking siblings, they're asking cousins, they're asking peers at school, they're going on the internet to ask what this joke means, right? So, like, let's just not do it. I've had situations where I've had to call out family members and be like, my kid's old enough to probably understand that, so, like, we need to stop with the jokes, like, not cool. If your kid is 2 or 3, like, they're not understanding mostly any of those kinds of things, it's different than if your kid is, like, maybe 7 and older, and they're like, "What does that mean?" And so that's a sign that if that adult doesn't care and they're like, "Oh, whatever, like, it's just a funny joke," or, like, they don't understand and they're gonna keep doing it, that's not cool, and I would call that out every single time. Okay, a little bit over time here, but thank you all for those who tuned in. If you're watching this on the replay, let me know your thoughts on this too. Let me know if you have any questions. I will be back next Friday. I go live 2 times for everyone who is a subscriber and 4 times for paid subscribers. So every single Friday for paid subscribers. So if you're a paid subscriber, it's great to see you. If you are a free subscriber, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you decide to join the community. There's so many great benefits to being a paid subscriber. So I hope that you join and connect with me and are checking out the workshops. There's a new one that is going to be launching on February 6th for parents of toddlers. So if that's you, definitely check it out. All right, I'm Rosalia Rivera for another live here on Substack. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye bye.